Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Josh Wonders Why. I'm here with Pastor Kelly, and we're here just to chat for, I don't know, however long we want to chat, however long the Spirit moves us, right? We could be here all night. You might want to get a cup of coffee on the pot of coffee brewing. So, in preparing for Josh Wonders Why tonight, I was struggling because, as you're probably aware, there's been a lot of just bad news coming out. Mm-hmm. And if you check Facebook and do fall into the trap of doom scrolling like I do, you fall into the trap of seeing there's so many, polarized opposite viewpoints and, algorithms posting stuff. And it's with the point of getting to your emotions, try to drive a rise out of you, right? To get clicks and views and stuff. So it's just been a struggle, I think, lately just with, the school shootings and this ongoing political violence and just the polarization of our nation. It's like, when's it going to end, right?
Mm-hmm. And as my doctor said today, algorithms be algorithming.
They are algorithming. They're algorithming overtime as well, it seems like sometimes.
Yeah. She also mentioned we aren't designed to take in that much information.
Yes.
And I talked a little bit about that this morning. You may just need to step back away from Facebook, just go directly to Uprooted Faith. Yeah. Do not scroll.
And that's where I struggle with the doom scrolling, which even when you go to the news sites, they're just it's just nonstop news that's meant to get a rise out of you, not a positive rise.
Right.
Because negative news, like I talked about before, is what drives views and comments and stuff.
And social media will feed us what it thinks we want to eat.
Yes. That's a good segue.
So, it is a good segue.
So tonight,
I didn't even intend it that way.
So tonight, just give you all a break as you're doom scrolling. If you come across this video, hopefully it would be more light-hearted. So tonight, the question I'm going to ask is, why did Jesus use so many food stories? So I was thinking about this, and did you know that if you look at all the parables in the Gospels, and I'll get to how I did this calculation, about 40% of the parables are about food and drink or something else. He does also have a couple stories of his miracles where he does like water and wine, feeding the 5,000, Last Supper. I mean, that dude was constantly partying, it seems like, or always eating. He was always hungry.
I think Jesus liked a good party.
He does. It seemed like he did. So I also thought, I was thinking about this too, that if Jesus was here nowadays and he did his own little podcast or live stream, majority of the time he'd be talking about food. So he may be sampling food like we're doing, and that's what he'd be talking about. So what I want to ask tonight is, as it keeps showing up again and again in the gospel, why does God care so much about food, and what does it mean to us? Was Jesus just always hungry? Did he always like to party? Or is there some deeper meaning that we can get into? So that's what I want to touch on tonight, is just let's talk about food. And I apologize because as we were preparing for this, you had hinted at it'd be nice if we had snacks because this discussion will get us hungry.
Will there be snacks? Because it might make me hungry to talk about all these.
And I should have brought snacks. But I was running late.
That's all right. We got some in the closet.
Yeah, that's true. We can always bust those out.
I thought you were just going to get a box out that we have already gotten into.
That would have been a good idea, and I didn't think about that.
I'm not up for the flavors tonight, I don't think.
That's fine. So let's talk about just food in the gospel. So I did some research, and so I'll be honest. For the list of parables, because I was getting disagreeing information depending on who you talk to or where you look at. It says the exact number of parables may depend on how you define parables. There can be anywhere from like 30 or there could be upwards of 50. It depends how you define it. So I was like, okay, I need a consistent source. I need something that just just give me an answer. Don't tell me there's a range, right?
Just the facts, man.
So I went to ChatGPT, which is an AI-sourced site, and I just typed in how many parables are in the Gospels and how many parables are about food. Because I had read there was 40%. And it gave me a list of 36 distinct parables that, and of the 36, there are 15 that are food related, at least what ChatGPT says. Now you may ask, how did ChatGPT determine what was a parable and what was not a parable? So let's start there. So ChatGPT looked at just the canonical Gospels. Yeah. Thank you. So just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. However, it's worth noting that, and I didn't realize this, and you probably knew this, John has no traditional parables in it. There are no parables in John, which I was surprised by. I was like, there's got to be some parables. But
it is vastly different than the other three. The other three were like working from the same sources.
yes, so it says technically John has 0 parables, though it has lots of metaphors, lots of metaphoricals, like the I am sayings, or I am the good shepherd, I am the bread of life. Those aren't considered parables in Chat GPT's mind. And then it looked at stories that Jesus explicitly presented as teaching illustrations. So he often introduced it as like the kingdom of heaven is like, or saying, suppose, yada, yada, yada. So I looked at those stories, and then he also, not he, I say like Chat GPT is a person, but this AI tool then looked, I guess, cross-referenced that with scholarly consensus. So it looked at standard lists from different Bible studies that it lists out just to see how that compared. And it is worth noting there are some, like, we'll say, quote-unquote mini parables, like parables that probably are 1 verse or 2 verses. It included those because they're short but still classified as parables in the sense.
Oh, okay.
So it pulled in some shorter parables. What wasn't included were metaphors or sayings that aren't narrative parables. So like example, I am the good shepherd, or I am the bread of life. ChatGPT said that's not a parable, that's a metaphor. I'm not counting it. It also didn't include miracles, and we'll talk about miracles separately, but it didn't include miracles as parables because those aren't parables. Those are symbolic in a different, I will say, a literary theme. I don't know what I'm thinking about. And then also didn't include any of the extended allegories in John. So those are usually excluded from the traditional parable list. So when ChatGPT used that, it has 39 or 36 distinct parables. Now you may say, well, if you're curious, between Matthew, Mark, and Luke, how many does each book have? I'm glad you asked, 'cause I did that calculation. So of all of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Luke has the most parables in 25. Now, of those 25, there are 10 that are shared with Matthew and 5 that are shared by Mark. So it has 15 unique parables in Luke. Mark only has 1 unique parable. Majority of its parables are shared with Matthew. And Matthew has 20 total parables, but 10 of them are shared with Luke, 10 of Mark, so there's 10 unique in Matthew. So anyways, Luke by far has the most parables and the most unique parables. If you want to know those stats. I did that because I was curious. I know you say no math, but I like to do math every once in a while, so I did that.
Help yourself.
And also food related. So how did it know which parables should we base it off of food? So it marked parables as food related if they involved food items like bread, wine, yeast, figs, seeds, wheat, etc. Or it talked about food production like vineyards, farming, sowing, harvest. Or it talked about meals or banquets like weddings, feasts, rich man's table. Stuff it didn't mark if food was only incidental or metaphorical without being central to the plot. For example, the Good Samaritan mentions wine and oil, but it's not a story about food. So the AI tool said, I'm not going to mark it as food. So
That's
hopefully
fair.
that makes sense.
That's fair.
So when that's all said and done, it did highlight there are 15 parables of the 36 that are food related, which is a little over 40%. So you could, if you round up, roughly half the time Jesus had food on his mind when he's talking about stuff. So is it like that when he's in the crowd and he's talking, he gets hungry, so his mind wanders to food and he just says, I'm going to give a food parable because I'm starving, right? Let's talk about that more.
No, I don't think so. I think he used food because everybody eats.
Well, let's talk. Yeah, so let's do that. So a couple examples I want to do for. I guess I want to highlight just a couple of parables, and we can just talk about those. So the one I want to start with was the Great Banquet, and if I can find where I have this marked. So the parable of the Great Banquet is just about, and maybe I'll just read through this. So basically the parable says, a certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, come, for everything is now ready. But they all began to make excuses. Another said, I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. So anyways, people gave excuses. The servant came back and reported this to the master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered the servant, go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring them the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. The servant said, 'What you ordered has been done, but there is still room.' Then the master told the servant, 'Go out to the roads and the country lanes and make them come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those men who were invited will get a taste of my banquet.'" So, parable of the great banquet, using food, I could see this as using food to show how God's invitation is for all people and not just certain people, right?
Yeah.
Then there's the prodigal son, where they celebrate at the end the return of the prodigal son, get the fatted calf, let's slaughter it, let's have a big party because you're back, what's lost was been found. There is the story of, I got to find this one, the leaven in the dough, which I wasn't too, let's see, why did I not? Because it goes by a different name in here. It's the parables of the mustard seed and the yeast. So it's like the kingdom of heaven is like the yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour until it worked all through the dough. And then there's like, so anyways, the parables list out of food, and I guess why did he use food? And I think you answered it, because it's common.
Yeah.
Everybody's hungry, everybody's thirsty, so everybody eats, right?
Yeah, Jesus just used common things in parables. Because he was explaining more difficult things. So when you explain something difficult, it helps to use some common metaphor for it. And everybody eats. Everybody knew farming. Everybody knew about yeast.
Everybody goes to parties or would like to be invited to a party if they don't go to parties, right?
Yeah, everybody knows about parties. They might not get invited to them, but everybody knows they're happening because they were loud.
But they understand that feeling too. Like maybe if he's talking to a crowd that is in the margins, he's talking about, being invited to a party, and it may ring more with them saying, well, I've never been invited to a party. And this rings more true. They're like, well, if God's open to inviting me, then they maybe get a sense of excitement or inclusion that they haven't felt before. Or, it's not like saying, I was thinking about this more of he wouldn't say, the kingdom of heaven is like riding a horse, because not everybody has ridden a horse, so you can't relate to that. Or like flying a kite. Yeah. Although I don't know if people flew a kite in the ancient times, so they may not be able to relate. But food is something everybody does. It's something that common we all share.
They were all common things, just like the mustard seed. Everybody knew what a mustard seed was and what it looked like when it grew. Yeah.
The other thing I think it shows, too, with these parables is that maybe drives home the point that some people may have considered food as a means for survival only. And because they were probably in the margins, they probably didn't get enough to feed. And by Jesus using these parables, he could show that, food is invitation, transformation, dependence on God, to trust in him that he will give you the nourishment. And it would ring truer with those folks that are struggling. They would see this as, that's better than I currently have with my physical needs, or my physical food.
And the early church in Acts, it talks about how the early church ate together. Yeah. They held everything in common. They studied the scriptures. They broke bread together. And so, and then on the road to Emmaus, when the two people didn't recognize Jesus until he broke the bread. Yeah. And then they realized it was him. And there's something about eating together that fosters community. Yeah. And kind of when you're all around a table, you're kind of like in a small community together, and you're all kind of on the same level there. Yeah. And so I think all in all, it just resonates as a common thing.
Yeah, I was going to look at something because you said I can't remember what I was going to say. So you sort of mentioned this. So that was the parable. So he used something that people could understand, and that's probably why 40% of is about food, because that's something people could understand at the time. That's what they did. At least the common folks did. Because he tried to teach people for what they understood. So the other thing, let's talk about then food in Jesus' miracles. So this percentage is by far not as high. So based on what Google tells me, and I didn't do the math, I didn't ask AI to tell me how does it classify a miracle, but there's roughly about 37 distinct miracles that Jesus does throughout the Gospels.
Okay.
Of those, I believe there's only about 3 that are about food and drink. So percentages are a lot lower, but I think the stories are still worth talking about. And I highlighted them before. There's the feeding of the 5,000, there's water into wine, and there's the Last Supper. And well, what I was thinking about this more is maybe the significance of the food or of these ceremonies or eating with the actions is something people always do. Everybody needs to eat, and they can relate to Jesus' actions, right? And not a miracle, but there are other examples of Jesus eating with tax collectors and sinners, and sort of breaking the social norm of this is how we're supposed to be doing, banquets or eating. And he sort of said, no, I'm not going to follow that. I'm going to eat.
And then also, Paul wrote about, I can't remember where it was. I can't remember who exactly he was talking to, but he was saying, you're messing this up because you're supposed to wait until everybody gets to your house for church.
Yeah.
And then you eat together. But some of you are eating before other people get there. And then there's not enough left. Or it's just the leftovers that you didn't want to eat, for the people that get there later. Maybe the people who had to work.
Yeah.
And so there's that, even then there was beginning to be this pull away from inclusion.
Yeah. Because that's the thing with eating is as you invite everybody, you can invite everybody at the same table to be included, right?
Yeah. So it's like the United Methodist way of doing communion is through an open table.
Yeah.
Everyone is invited to the table. You don't have to be a member of this church or that church. You don't, you just come.
Yeah.
You're invited.
And I should have done this. This is the miracles, just the different stories of Jesus being somewhere food related. Because outside of that, like we already mentioned, some other stuff. There's the story of what he's at Mary Martha's house, and one of them is running around trying to hectically get ready. Yeah, and then she complains. But it seemed like again, most of the stories, I should have done the math on that. Most of the stories about Jesus, he's always at a party or someone's house getting ready to eat. So the dude must have just got around, just went around to eat places. Like, I wonder where I can eat tonight, right? But again, I think
there were times though that he didn't get to eat at all.
Yeah.
There were 40 days of fasting.
Yeah.
Before that kicked off the ministry.
Well, Tony made a comment in the post today about that. Is because I asked Josh Wonders why are there so many. Jesus used so many food stories, and Tony's response was, well, he fasted for 40 days. The guy probably was hungry after that, right?
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny. But I think, like you said, the reason Jesus was always, there's a story about Jesus always eating or being with people is because the food brings people together. He can use those moments as a teaching moment, right? Again, and try to also use this to maybe try to break social norms occasionally where I'm going to eat with sinners and tax collectors and not just the rich and the popular, right?
Yeah.
So that helps understand, I guess, trying to think towards maybe today, in the church and stuff, and, how the church uses food maybe to still continue to drive that community, right? So like you mentioned, communion and how the Methodist Church has open communion, so everybody's invited at the table. There's also, I think there's multiple events at our churches that, potlucks or meals where everybody comes together. There's Wednesday meals as well, where everybody comes together just to, fellowship and have, enjoy together. And everybody's invited, there's no one that will be turned away. It just helps us, connect with others. And it's a way for us to connect in a way that, everybody's invited and included in the discussion.
And it's hospitality, which, Jesus was big on hospitality. And so, when someone comes over to your house, even if it's just for a little while, you usually, do you want something to drink?
Yeah.
Shall I make some coffee? Or,
So it's being hospitable. That's a good point. So that's really what I want to talk about tonight, was just food in the Bible, because I found it interesting as just looking through some notes and some stats that 40% of Jesus' parables were about food. So if anybody ever asks you, or if, this is a piece of trivia you can keep with you, is 40%. Maybe it's going to be on Jeopardy later tonight. We'll find out. But so just to sum things up, right? I guess Jesus used so many stories about food, so many parables. He was involved with food is because food is one thing that we all understand, right? We can relate to that easily, and it brings us together. It helps sustain us, and it points us to maybe help understand God's kingdom or God's hope to truly satisfy us in a way that maybe food and water don't quench, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. So appreciate you coming to help with the discussion tonight. Hopefully this gave you, maybe if you're watching, some lighthearted note with all the stress from Facebook.
Or maybe
and
it
news.
just made you hungry.
Yeah, that too. I'm going to go eat dinner after this. I guess curious if you are watching this and you're still watching this or watching this after it's gone live. In the comments, I guess, just curious if you had a favorite, maybe a food story from the Bible. Didn't have to be about Jesus, but if there's a food story from the Bible that stands out, I'd be curious. Maybe there's some really random food story in here that we could unpack more at a future Josh Wonders Why. Do you have a favorite food story? I should ask you this. Is there one that stands out?
I was just thinking about the story of Esther and how she was setting up Haman, who was trying to kill the Jews, and so she was trying to set him up before the king, and so she invited Haman and the king to a banquet, 5 nights in a row or something, and so he thought he had made it. Haman was in the top position because here, the queen's inviting me to her banquet, her special banquet, and all this rich food and everything, and then it turns out to not be. I'm not gonna spoil the story for you. Okay. It doesn't turn out so well for Haman.
Mine is probably the Mary and Martha story, because I don't know why, but I've always resonated with Martha because I've always had her side. Like, she was the one preparing for all this stuff. She was trying to be hospitable, and everybody else is just hanging around with Jesus, just chilling, and she's the one trying to get everything ready, right? Yeah. It's like, but then I struggle because Jesus is like, calm down, Martha. It's more important to be here with me because I'm here right now, right?
Yeah.
But then who else is going to feed you, Jesus?
It's like, but these men aren't going to fix your food. True, yeah. So, yeah. But, maybe if she'd sat down there with Mary, Jesus would have said, Peter, James, go fix dinner. That's
a good point. Yeah, maybe you never know. That's a good idea. You could have done that, saying, you guys have been lounging long enough.
That would have been a great story.
The only way that did happen, they just didn't want to put it in there because they're embarrassed about it, right?
Be, yeah.
We don't want to paint men in the bad light. So anyways, that's the discussion tonight. Thanks for watching us. Thanks again for helping with this with the chat. We'll be back again next Monday for another Josh Wonders Why. I'll be thinking about what I want to wonder. If there's anything that you want to wonder about with us, let us know in the comments, and we'd love to chat about that as well. So until next time, we'll see you later. Have a good night.
Bye.